A poor farmer finds a diamond ring worth 7 million while tending his field. He trusts the village captain to appraise it. Weeks pass with no word. Then the captain builds a mansion, buys luxury vehicles, and claims the ring was fake. But one photograph and a brave witness will expose a decade-long corruption scheme. This is the story of Junjun Ramos, a 23-year-old who refused to let power silence justice. October 2012, Ilocos Province, Northern Philippines. 23-year-old Delphine Ramos, Jr., known to everyone as Junjun, woke to the same view he'd seen every morning of his life. Rice fields stretching to the horizon, mud-caked paths, and the distinct smell of water buffalo that served as his farming companion. Junjun had never attended college. His entire existence revolved around agricultural work, planting, harvesting, tending animals, regardless of weather conditions. His family survived on subsistence farming, living in a makeshift dwelling with irregular income. Yet Junjun maintained hope that someday, somehow, circumstances would improve. One afternoon, while grazing his water buffalo near a particularly muddy section at the field's edge, something caught his eye. A glimmer beneath the harsh midday sun. Curious, he approached and pushed aside the tall grass. What he found would change everything. A thick ring with a substantial stone in the center lay half buried in the mud. Even covered in dirt, the piece possessed an unmistakable brilliance. This wasn't ordinary costume jewelry. The weight, the craftsmanship, the way light refracted through the stone suggested something valuable. Junjun immediately pocketed the ring and brought it home. In their modest dwelling, he showed the discovery to his father, Delphine Ramos Sr. Together they examined it carefully, studying the metal's weight and the intricate engravings. But lacking any expertise in jewelry or gemstones, they had no way to determine if the ring was genuinely valuable or merely an impressive imitation. The Ramos family faced a decision. They couldn't afford a professional appraisal, and taking such an item to strangers felt risky. After discussion, Delphine Sr. decided they should bring it to the barangay hall, the village administrative office, and seek guidance from Captain Francisco Medel. Captain Medel had served as their barangay leader for years. He was known throughout the region for his influence, intelligence, and experience handling various community matters. More importantly, he was considered a trusted friend to Delphine Sr. The family had no hesitation approaching him. The next day, father and son visited the captain's office. Inside, Captain Medel examined the ring carefully, turning it under the light and studying the stone with apparent expertise. He explained that he knew a jeweler in town, someone with proper training to authenticate and appraise genuine pieces. "I'll have this evaluated properly," the captain assured them. "Give me a few weeks. I'll get you accurate information about what you've found." He placed the ring in his desk drawer, closed it firmly, and told them not to worry. He would help them determine the true value. As the father and son left, they carried a mixture of anxiety and hope. If the stone was truly diamond, its value could be life-changing. They could finally afford to send Junjun's younger sibling to school. His mother could stop taking in laundry for other families. They might purchase their own land and build a proper home instead of their current ramshackle structure. On the tricycle ride back to their sitio, a small rural community, Junjun sat quietly, staring at his calloused hands, scarred from years of planting work. For the first time in his life, he allowed himself to imagine a different future. He had trusted a community leader. Surely that trust would be honored. After all, Captain Medel had always presented himself as someone who served the people, someone who helped those in need. What Junjun didn't yet understand was that trust, especially when combined with valuable assets and power imbalances, can become a weapon in the wrong hands. The promised weeks passed slowly. Each day, Junjun and his father continued their agricultural routine, tending fields, caring for livestock, living hand to mouth, while hoping for news about the ring's appraisal. 1 week became 2, then 3. No message arrived from Captain Medell. Initially, they rationalized the delay. Perhaps the evaluation process was more complex than anticipated. Maybe the captain was searching for potential buyers to get them the best price. They tried to remain patient, though anxiety steadily increased. By the 4th week, during rice planting season, Junjun could no longer suppress his concern. He'd also noticed his father's health declining. Delphin Sr. experienced more frequent chest tightness and breathing difficulties. Their need for money had become more urgent than ever. With help from a neighbor who owned a motorcycle, father and son returned to the barangay hall, determined to speak directly with the captain and get answers. What they encountered was a dramatically different reception than their first visit. Inside a room within the barangay hall, Captain Medell greeted them with a tone that was calm yet dismissive. Without preamble, he delivered his conclusion. The ring had been appraised and determined to be fake, a mere imitation with no real value. He claimed to have consulted not just one but multiple jewelers, all reaching the same conclusion. Delphin Sr. let out a heavy sigh. Junjun tried to process the information, though something felt wrong about the entire situation. Despite their lack of sophistication in such matters, both men sensed something off about the captain's manner. The way he avoided direct eye contact, the absence of any documentation or proof regarding the supposed appraisal. When they requested the ring be returned, even if it was worthless, the captain's demeanor shifted noticeably. He claimed he'd left it with the jeweler and couldn't retrieve it. When they pressed for details about which jewelry shop had evaluated it, he provided no specifics. He mentioned that an acquaintance had handled the transport, but refused to name this person. Father and son left the barangay hall feeling defeated, like wet paper in the rain. Delphin Sr. remained silent during the journey home. Junjun had lost his enthusiasm entirely. They'd entrusted the ring to someone they'd known for years, someone in a position of authority and respect. Now they were being told it no longer existed, and they lacked the confidence or resources to challenge that claim. Life returned to its previous rhythm over the following days. Junjun resumed buffalo herding while his father continued field work. Yet, despite their attempts to forget the incident, a nagging pain persisted, along with a recurring question that wouldn't go away. Why did the captain's explanation feel so dishonest? Still, what could they do? Without possessing the ring itself, how could they prove anything? They were poor farmers confronting an influential official. The power imbalance was overwhelming. The ring had briefly offered them hope, a glimpse of escape from perpetual poverty. Now it represented something else entirely, a reminder of their powerlessness in a system where those with authority could exploit those without. What the Ramos family didn't yet know was that their story wasn't over. The truth had a way of revealing itself, often through unexpected channels. And sometimes, justice required not just evidence, but courage, the willingness to stand up despite overwhelming odds. That courage would soon come from the most unlikely source. Mid-February 2013. Approximately 4 months after the Ramos family had entrusted their ring to Captain Medell, rumors began circulating through the barangay. Near the edge of the public market, residents noticed construction activity on a lot that had previously sat vacant. Trucks delivered sand and cement. Occasionally, a brand new black SUV appeared, so new it lacked proper registration plates. Workers steadily erected what was clearly becoming a substantial residential structure. Initially, few paid much attention. Construction wasn't unusual, and people assumed some entrepreneur from outside the area was building an investment property. But as the first floor took shape, the truth emerged about the project's owner. Word spread that the house belonged to Captain Medell. Contractors confirmed that representatives acting on the captain's behalf had identified themselves as owners. Additionally, The captain had acquired a new pickup truck, which he frequently parked prominently at the barangay hall. One afternoon, Junjun rode in the back of a tricycle returning from town and saw the construction site directly. Something inside him erupted, a surge of anger and disappointment he could barely contain. He remembered the conversation in the captain's office, the cold responses, the avoidance of eye contact, the refusal to provide documentation. Now, suddenly, the captain possessed a new house, new vehicles, and an apparently elevated lifestyle. Delphin Sr. tried not to indulge the suspicion. People gossiped that the captain had won a lottery jackpot. Perhaps that explained the sudden wealth. The older man wanted to maintain faith in someone he'd trusted for years. Yet beneath his stated confidence lurked a terrifying possibility. If the captain's wealth truly derived from the ring they'd entrusted to him, they would have no recourse. They were ordinary citizens, while the captain held position and resources. But Junjun thought differently. For him, truth mattered more than power dynamics. If you were right, you had an obligation to fight, regardless of the opponent's status. As Captain Medel's mansion grew larger and more impressive, Junjun's distress intensified. Each day watching the structure rise felt like a renewed reminder of what his family had lost. Every pillar seemed to stand on the brilliance of the ring he'd found in the mud, the ring that should have transformed his family's circumstances. One morning, Junjun decided to seek help. Though he lacked formal education, he possessed intelligence and determination. He needed to find someone trustworthy, someone who wouldn't exploit his family's vulnerability further. He traveled to the public attorney's office and met Attorney Lira Salvador, a lawyer with a long-standing reputation for advocating for the poor and marginalized. In that modest office, Junjun summoned his courage and recounted everything. Discovering the ring, entrusting it to the captain, the dismissive explanation about it being fake, and the captain's subsequent unexplained wealth. Attorney Salvador listened quietly, evaluating each detail. She explained gently but clearly that suspicion alone wasn't sufficient for legal action. They needed solid evidence. They needed witnesses. They needed proof that could withstand scrutiny in court. Junjun's mind returned to one person, Kagawad Manny, a barangay council member who had been present at the hall the day they'd handed over the ring to Captain Medel. The next day, Junjun approached him. Initially, Kagawad Manny hesitated, clearly apprehensive about getting involved. But witnessing Junjun's determination and principle, he gradually opened up. He admitted being present when the father and son delivered the ring, watching as the captain placed it in his desk drawer. But there was more. Kagawad Manny produced a photograph taken on his cell phone during a gathering at the captain's residence. Visible in the image's edge was the captain wearing a ring, the exact ring Junjun had found. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was concrete evidence supporting Junjun's account. Kagawad Manny's decision to come forward represented an act of significant courage. In small communities, challenging powerful officials carries serious risks. Social ostracism, economic retaliation, even physical threats. Yet something about Junjun's situation compelled him to take that risk. He revealed additional information that proved crucial. Over several weeks following the ring's delivery to the captain, Manny had observed Captain Medel making repeated trips to town, specifically visiting a jeweler he'd known for years. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't casual shopping, but deliberate business dealings. Manny's photograph showing the captain wearing the distinctive ring provided visual evidence that contradicted the captain's claim that the piece was worthless and had been left with an unnamed jeweler. If the ring truly had no value, why would Captain Medel wear it himself? With this testimony and photographic evidence, Attorney Salvador helped Junjun prepare formal legal action. She drafted and filed an affidavit complaint against Captain Francisco Medel, charging him with qualified theft and estafa, serious criminal offenses involving betrayal of trust and fraudulent misappropriation. The suspicions that had haunted the Ramos family for months were now formalized into official accusations, supported by a credible witness willing to testify under oath. When Captain Medell received notification of the complaint, he appeared surprised, but not shocked, suggesting he'd perhaps anticipated potential consequences. His initial response was firm denial. He rejected all accusations and stated his intention to defend himself against what he characterized as baseless claims. However, behind his public confidence, the captain recognized a serious problem. Kagawad Mani's willingness to testify created significant legal jeopardy. Without that witness, the case would collapse into unprovable allegations. But with Mani's testimony and supporting photograph, a credible narrative emerged that could withstand judicial scrutiny. Within days, rumors circulated that Captain Medell had attempted to bribe Kagawad Mani, offering substantial money in exchange for recanting or modifying his statements. The exact amount was never confirmed, but multiple sources reported the captain's representatives approaching Mani with financial incentives to change his story. To his credit, Kagawad Mani refused. He'd made a decision based on principle, supporting the Ramos family because their cause was just, and no amount of money would compromise that position. He understood that accepting the bribe would make him complicit in the very corruption he was trying to expose. His refusal marked a turning point. The case would proceed to trial with credible witness testimony intact. For Junjun and his father, Mani's steadfastness represented something profound, proof that not everyone could be bought, that integrity still existed even in systems rife with corruption. They'd encountered one official who'd betrayed trust for personal gain, but they'd also found another willing to risk his own standing for justice. As the case moved forward through the legal system, word spread throughout the community. People took sides. Some defended Captain Medell, arguing that his years of service shouldn't be destroyed by accusations from poor farmers seeking easy money. Others supported the Ramos family, pointing to the suspicious timing of the captain's sudden wealth. The upcoming trial would determine more than just one case's outcome. It would test whether justice could function when power and poverty collided, whether the legal system truly served everyone equally, or whether it primarily protected those with influence and resources. March 24, 2013. The first hearing arrived. The regional trial court hearing represented the Ramos family's first experience with formal legal proceedings. For Junjun and his father, accustomed to rice fields and manual labor, the courtroom environment felt intimidating and foreign. Yet they arrived determined to see justice served. Attorney Salvador opened the case by presenting Junjun's narrative. The discovery of the ring in the muddy field, the decision to seek the captain's assistance in appraising it, the prolonged silence, the dismissive claim that it was fake, and the subsequent appearance of unexplained wealth in Captain Medell's possession. She established the fundamental question: how could a barangay captain, earning a modest government salary, suddenly afford to construct a mansion, purchase luxury vehicles, and dramatically elevate his lifestyle, all within months of receiving a potentially valuable ring for appraisal? The prosecution's case rested on three pillars: witness testimony, photographic evidence, and financial documentation revealing expenditures inconsistent with the captain's legitimate income. Kagawad Mani took the stand and provided detailed testimony about the day the Ramos family delivered the ring. He described watching Captain Medell receive the piece, examine it, and place it deliberately in his desk drawer, while promising to have it appraised. He testified about observing the captain's subsequent frequent visits to a specific jeweler in town. Most damaging, he presented the photograph from a social gathering, clearly showing Captain Medell wearing a distinctive ring that matched the complainant's description. The image was projected for the court. Junjun immediately identified the ring as the one he'd found. The match was unmistakable: the setting, the stone size, The unique design elements all corresponded. Then came perhaps the most devastating testimony: the jeweler himself. Under subpoena, the jewelry shop owner took the stand. Under oath, he admitted purchasing the ring from Captain Medell for 7 million pesos, approximately $140,000 USD at the time. The amount was staggering, especially in a rural province where such figures represented generational wealth. The jeweler explained the transaction's mechanics. Captain Medell had initially left the ring on consignment, meaning the shop would hold and market it while seeking buyers. A gemologist from Manila had conducted the appraisal, confirming the stone's authenticity and substantial value. After approximately 1 month, a jewelry collector from Tarlac province purchased the piece. The jeweler received a 2% commission per their agreement, meaning Captain Medell walked away with approximately 6.8 million pesos. When asked whether he'd known the ring didn't belong to Captain Medell, the jeweler firmly denied such knowledge. He testified that the captain presented himself as the rightful owner, someone who'd inherited the piece from a relative. The jeweler claimed he hadn't questioned the provenance further, never suspecting he was facilitating the sale of stolen property. This testimony proved devastating to the defense. It established not only that the ring was genuine and valuable, directly contradicting the captain's claim it was worthless, but also that Captain Medell had personally profited from its sale to the tune of nearly 7 million pesos. Captain Medell's defense attorney attempted various strategies to undermine the prosecution's case, but the evidence proved overwhelming. They couldn't explain the photographic evidence. They couldn't account for the sudden wealth. They couldn't produce any documentation of the supposed fake appraisal the captain had claimed to obtain. The defense's primary strategy involved technical challenges, questioning procedural elements and raising doubts about chain of custody. But these arguments rang hollow against the straightforward narrative supported by multiple witnesses and documentary evidence. After several hearings and deliberations, the court prepared to render its decision. The proceedings had attracted significant community attention, unusual for a rural barangay, where legal cases typically involved land disputes or minor infractions rather than major theft allegations against prominent officials. On the final hearing day, the courtroom was packed with observers from the community. Some came to support the Ramos family, others to witness the outcome of accusations against a long-serving captain, and still others simply drawn by the dramatic nature of the case. The judge delivered a comprehensive decision that methodically addressed each element of the charges. Regarding qualified theft, the court found that Captain Medell had indeed received the ring from the Ramos family under circumstances creating a fiduciary duty, a special relationship of trust. He'd explicitly promised to have it appraised and return it with accurate information. Instead, he'd misappropriated the ring for personal gain, selling it and keeping the proceeds. The qualified aspect referred to the grave abuse of confidence, which elevated the offense's severity under Philippine law. Regarding estafa, fraud, the court determined that Captain Medell had deliberately deceived the Ramos family through false representations. He'd claimed the ring was worthless and had been left with an unidentified jeweler, when in fact he'd sold it for millions and pocketed the money. This fraudulent misrepresentation deprived the rightful owners of their property and its value. The evidence supporting these conclusions was overwhelming. Kagawad Manny's eyewitness testimony about the ring's delivery and the captain wearing it, the photograph showing the distinctive piece, the jeweler's admission of the purchase and sale, financial records showing the captain's sudden acquisition of expensive property and vehicles inconsistent with his salary, and the captain's inability to produce any credible alternative explanation for his newfound wealth. The judge's language was unambiguous. The court finds that a clear pattern of betrayal and exploitation occurred. The defendant occupied a position of trust and authority within the community. Rather than serving those who sought his assistance, he chose to exploit their vulnerability and lack of resources for personal enrichment. This conduct represents a profound breach of public trust. Captain Francisco Medel was sentenced to imprisonment, the specific term based on Philippine sentencing guidelines for qualified theft and estafa, involving substantial amounts. Additionally, the court ordered him to return the full amount received from the ring's sale, plus damages. Critically, the court issued a civil forfeiture order, placing all assets acquired with proceeds from the ring's sale under legal seizure. This included the mansion under construction, the pickup truck, a motorcycle, and other property purchased during the relevant period. When the verdict was read, the courtroom reaction was mixed. Supporters of the Ramos family expressed relief and satisfaction, validation that justice could prevail even when challenging powerful officials. Others, particularly those with close ties to Captain Medel, expressed dismay and disbelief that a long-serving leader could be convicted based on accusations from poor farmers. For Junjun and his father, the moment brought complex emotions. Vindication, certainly. Their account had been believed and verified. But also exhaustion from the lengthy legal battle, and a measure of sadness that someone they'd once trusted had betrayed them so thoroughly. Attorney Salvador embraced them, congratulating them on their courage. "This case proves something important," she told them. "The law can work for everyone, not just those with power and money, but it requires people willing to stand up and fight for what's right." Following the court's decision, the process of restitution began, converting Captain Medel's seized assets into compensation for the Ramos family. This proved more complex than simply handing over money, requiring legal procedures, asset appraisals, and bureaucratic processing. Under the civil forfeiture order, all property acquired with proceeds from the ring's sale was transferred to government custody pending public auction. The half-completed mansion, the pickup truck, the motorcycle, each was professionally appraised to determine market value. The auction process took several weeks. Announcements were posted, potential buyers inspected the properties, and bids were collected. The house, despite being incomplete, attracted interest from families seeking affordable property they could finish themselves. The vehicles found buyers quickly, as they were relatively new and well-maintained. From the total proceeds, various deductions occurred: taxes, administrative fees associated with the seizure and sale, legal costs, and court fees. The bureaucratic machinery of justice consumed a portion of the funds before the remainder could be distributed to the victims. After all deductions, 6 million pesos was remitted to Junjun and Delphine Sr., roughly $120,000 USD. While this was less than the original 6.8 million the captain had received, it still represented a life-changing amount for a family that had survived on subsistence farming. The moment they received confirmation of the transfer, father and son sat in stunned silence. They'd never imagined possessing such wealth. What had begun as a glimmer in muddy soil and had taken them through betrayal, legal battles, and years of uncertainty had finally concluded with tangible justice. Their first decision was practical and symbolic: purchasing agricultural land. For generations, the Ramos family had worked other people's fields as tenant farmers, sharing harvests and living at the mercy of landowners. Now, for the first time, they would own the land they cultivated. They acquired a substantial parcel, enough for productive rice farming with room for expansion. On this land, they constructed a simple but spacious house. Nothing ostentatious like the captain's mansion had been, but solid, comfortable, and genuinely theirs. For Delphine Sr., who'd spent his entire life in makeshift shelters, having a permanent home with proper walls and a secure roof represented the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. The family also made a point of acknowledging those who'd helped them. They gave Kagawad Manny 200,000 pesos, approximately $4,000, as gratitude for his courageous testimony. Without his willingness to speak truth despite pressure and attempted bribery, their case would never have succeeded. Manny initially hesitated to accept, insisting he'd simply done what was right. But the family insisted. His sacrifice deserved recognition. Junjun's younger sibling, who'd been forced to defer education due to financial constraints, immediately enrolled in school. The family finally had resources to invest in education without wondering where next week's food would come from. Perhaps most significantly for Junjun's mother, she stopped taking in laundry from other households, work that had been physically demanding and poorly compensated. Instead, she could focus on managing their own household and assisting her husband with their newly expanded agricultural operation. Despite their newfound financial security, the family made a conscious decision not to abandon farming. The land and agricultural work had defined their identity for generations. Rather than seeking an entirely different lifestyle, they chose to continue farming, but now as landowners rather than tenants, with proper resources and equipment rather than borrowed tools and rented animals. Junjun enrolled in a vocational training program in town, studying agricultural techniques and small business management. Using a portion of the money, he also opened a small shop selling seeds, fertilizer, and farming supplies to other local farmers. While the Ramos family rebuilt their lives with their restored fortune, Captain Francisco Medel faced dramatically different circumstances. He was transferred to the provincial jail in Ilocos, where he would serve his sentence for qualified theft and estafa. The fall from prominence was precipitous and complete. The man who'd once wielded significant influence in his community, making decisions that affected residents' lives, commanding respect, and moving freely through social circles, now lived in a cell with limited privileges and restricted movement. His reputation, built over years of public service, was irreparably destroyed. When community members discussed Captain Medel now, they didn't recall positive contributions he might have made during his tenure. Instead, his name became synonymous with corruption, greed, and betrayal of public trust. The case became a cautionary tale told throughout the region, a reminder that positions of authority could be exploited for personal gain, and that doing so carried consequences. Some former supporters expressed disappointment and confusion. How could someone who'd served the community for years risk everything for one ring? What had motivated him to betray a family that had trusted him explicitly? Psychologically, the captain's choices reflected a pattern common in corruption cases: opportunity combined with rationalization. He'd likely convinced himself that poor farmers wouldn't effectively challenge him, that his position protected him from scrutiny, or that he somehow deserved the windfall more than they did. Many corrupt officials engage in elaborate self-justification, believing their actions are acceptable because they serve the public in other ways, or because everyone does it, or because the victims won't be harmed significantly. But corruption always involves human cost. In this case, the captain's actions had nearly destroyed a family's one opportunity to escape poverty. His betrayal had caused months of anxiety, damaged trust in community institutions, and forced people with limited resources to engage in expensive, stressful legal battles just to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. For the broader community, the case offered important lessons. It demonstrated that justice systems, despite their flaws and barriers, could sometimes function as intended, protecting vulnerable citizens against exploitation by those with power. It showed that witnesses willing to testify truthfully, despite pressure, could make the difference between injustice and accountability. And it proved that courage and persistence, even from people with minimal resources, could challenge and overcome corruption. Years later, reflecting on their journey, Junjun and his father acknowledged how easily things could have ended differently. Without Kagawad Mani's testimony, they would have had no case. Without attorney Salvador's pro bono representation, they couldn't have navigated the legal system. Without their own determination to pursue truth, despite intimidation and power imbalances, they would have simply accepted the loss and continued struggling in poverty. The ring that Junjun found gleaming in the mud had represented more than potential wealth. It had become a test of character, justice, and social systems. Would truth prevail over power? Would institutions protect the vulnerable or the privileged? Would witnesses speak honestly, despite personal risk? In this instance, the answers aligned with justice. But both father and son recognized how precarious that outcome had been, how easily the balance could have tipped the other way. They remained grateful, not just for the financial restitution, but for the validation that their struggle had meaning, that standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable, can sometimes produce results that change lives and communities. The diamond ring, ultimately, had brought them more than money. It had brought dignity, agency, and proof that in a world often dominated by power and privilege, ordinary people could still assert their rights and find justice.